video, we made this responsive surface. You can see that we have a grid of points. We're measuring the distance from this attractor point to all these points in order to sort of project upwards and sort of sculpt some sort of three-dimensional surface, and that the geometry of the surface changes as we move the attractor point around. So we call that responsive surface. And so now we're going to do the second part of this, putting the bow truss recipe that we created a long time ago into this to maybe make trusses a little easier now. So it's not like it's all that interesting to make one bow truss, but when we can start to make like a number of them across, let's say, a surface representing our let's say the facade of a building or a roof of a building or something like that, then that becomes, I think, really sort of pretty powerful. So let me just move some quick things around, just some spring cleaning here. Just move a few things around, make a little more room. Right, but at any rate, we're going to start with our ingredient of a surface now. Right, so what we want to do is we want to find the isoparm or the isoparametric curves, let's say in this direction for this surface. And we'll use those as the starting sort of chord for our bow truss recipe. And so then we'll start to build a set of trusses off of this shape. And you can see that the shape changes its geometry, and so each truss will be different. And so that's, I think, another really interesting, powerful thing about parametric design, of course, is that now that we can make one bow truss, we can make as many as we want, and they can all be differentiated, right? Depending on what we're inputting or how we adjust some of the parameters. So with all that said, let's get to work. One of the things we need to do is we need to start to identify locations, right? To define, let's say, some latitude lines across this surface, right? And so really quickly, let's go to the curve tab. And I'm going to look at splines, I think. Yeah, here we go. So we have things like curves on surface. We have geodesics. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use isocurves. So I'm going to find some isoparametric curves, some isoparms from this surface. And so it's going to ask us for the surface to pull an isoparm off of. And it's going to ask for a UV coordinate. Okay. So we give it a UV coordinate, and it'll generate the isoparm in the U direction and then in the V direction. In other words, a latitude and a longitude line. Okay, and so what I want to do is I want to find a series of these lines across. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a series of UV coordinates across this. Okay, and so to generate that list, one of the things I might do is just divide this surface. Remember, we used divide. I had a video just a few videos back, maybe a couple of videos back. Divide surface. What that does is that actually populates the surface with a set of points. And so I'm going to use that to populate a set of points and then to find the UV coordinates for each of those points, and then plug those UV coordinates into here in order to generate a set of isoparms. Okay. So the last thing I need to do is just a little more house cleaning. I'm going to turn the preview off on some of these geometries. They're really, really visually distracting, I would say. Yeah, I just want to see that surface because we're going to start doing things to the surface, and I want to be able to sort of see the geometry that we're doing here. So we're going to populate the surface with points, and then we're going to populate it with the isoparms. And so I want to be able to see those very clearly. So I turned the preview off of all that other stuff that we did previously. All right, so we need to generate some UV coordinates as the other second ingredient for this isoparm widget. So to do that, let's go to the surface, and I'm going to say Utilities, Surface Divide, or Divide Surface. Okay, I'm going to divide this surface. And by default, I think these are set to 10 divisions and 10 divisions in U and V. I want to change that. And I'm going to change that. I'm going to just use a little notepad, so params, and then here's the panel. I can type in any number I want into this. I'm going to type in 1. Okay, and I'm going to use that. Let's see. I'll plug in 1 for the V in my case. Okay. I'm going to disconnect this one. I'm going to make a second panel. Oh, you know what? For the U, I know I want to change that U to either increase or decrease it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a number slider for that one. Okay. And I'm going to constrain this to integers. I'm going to set the minimum to 1. We don't want to divide something by 0. I can change the max to something larger, like 20. All right, now give us a little bit of freedom here to add more or less trusses and to adjust the spacing in between them, right? Let's say that's based off of the loading scenarios and then the structural performance required. So now we have a set of UV coordinates. Okay. Now what's interesting here is that we have, well, let's take a look at this, right? So we're dividing the surface 11 times in the U direction, right? So we're dividing it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 11 divisions. And that means we have 12 points, right? As we look at if we populate each of those divisions, including the ends of the surface with points. Okay, so we get 12 points out, but we get 12 points on this side and then 12 points on this side, interestingly. And so we have, if I hold my cursor over these UV coordinates, we get, it says 24 locally defined values at the top. So we expect that. But look at this. If you look at the, in fact, I'll pull a panel open so I can point to certain things with my cursor. Right. You can see, let's see here. You can see that we have this tree branch 0, 0, 0, 0, right? Okay, let me hold my cursor over this again. You can see along the left-hand side of the panel that popped up with my cursor, right? We have 0, 0, 0, 0, then 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 2, 0, 0, 0, 3, 0, 0, 0, 4, 0, 0, 0, 5, all the way to 0, 0, 0, 11. And so those are tree branches. And in the parentheses next to each of those branches, it says there are 2 items, n equals 2, like n number of items, n equals 2. Okay, so when I plug this into the panel, you can see that we have a point here, 0, 0, 0. And we have a point here, 0, 21, 0. And then we have 2, 0, 0, and then 2, 21, 0 over here. And so what it's done is every tree branch, there's 2 items, this point and then this point, right? And then the next one, this point and this point. We really only want one of these from each of these tree branches, okay? And so if you think about this, really quickly, what it's telling us is that we have a list of lists. So we have a list of 2 items for this first one, and a list of 2 items here, and a list of 2 items here. We have basically a list of 12 lists, okay? And each of those are a list of 2 items each. It's kind of a mind bender, I realize. So let's talk about this by maybe taking just the first item from each of these lists, okay? So we can take a particular item from a list, right, by going to the Sets tab, and going to the list items. Remember, this is where we shifted lists. This is where we can sort lists and reverse lists, and we can pull out just one particular item from a list, right? So the index for the first item will be 0, because computers start counting at 0. Remember that, right? And so our first item, okay, let's try this. Let's pull this in, and let's see what we have now. So we have the same number of tree branches, starting at 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 11. So that's 12 tree branches. But now look at in parentheses, n equals 1 for each of those, right? In other words, there's only one item in each of these tree branches now, okay? And so it's just that first value, since we put the index of 0 here to pull out the first item from each of those lists. So now we can plug these in for our UVs. Okay, now we plugged in a data tree in with a list here. And so we're getting a data tree out, and we're getting another data tree out. And man, for the life of me, I can't remember if I really want to see that data tree for a while or not. So let's leave it for right now. But suffice to say, what we can do, and sometimes we have to do this, sometimes we can turn a list into a data tree, and sometimes we can flatten out a data tree back into just a really generic list, okay? And so we'll see if that opportunity pops up here as we move forward. But really, again, this comes back to data matching, which is something that we mentioned in the last video again. And that is, as we start to use these ingredients, right? If one's a data tree and the other one's a list, then sometimes things don't match up the way we want. And so sometimes we need to make sure that we're matching up data trees with data trees or lists with other lists, okay? And so one of the things I need to do is figure out, do I want the U curves or the V curves? And sometimes, again, this hurts my brain to think about it. So what I'll do is I'll just plug this in and select it. Nope, probably it's this one. Yeah, so I can select this widget with just the V curves, and I can see which ones are turning green. All right, those are the ones I want. So these are the curves that I'm going to use to make build the rest of the trusses from. So each of these are going to be the starting shape of a truss. Okay, so if you remember back to our recipe, one of the things we do is we evaluate our initial curve, right? Now we have an initial list of curves. So we're going to evaluate each of these curves at a t parameter. And we're going to build a sort of vertical line from each of those points. And then we can connect the dots to build a sort of bow. Okay, so let's do that. And I'll just execute it quickly, but I'll try to explain what I'm doing as I go. We're going to evaluate these curves. So we're going to find the evaluate curve at a t parameter. We'll plug these in. And for the parameter, I'll use a number line, number slider. Okay, and as you can see, I go from 0 to 1. I'm not going very far along the curve. That's because I forgot to reparameterize my curves. Now the endpoints are at 1, starting points are at 0. Now we can move across those as much as we want. Okay, so I have these points. Now it's time to build a vertical line. And so I'm going to go to curve, and go start line by start point direction length. Start point, I'll use these points. Direction, I'm just going to leave these for now. And the length, I'm going to make that a number slider, something that we can adjust later on. Go ahead and plug that in. I'll change the maximum so it's a little bigger than 1. 1 seems like a bit small to me. 20 is probably too large, but you know, we have again some latitude, some freedom here to adjust these things as we want. And we can always dial the minimum maximums into something more appropriate at a later time, of course. All right, so now what we need are the starts and ends of some of these lines that these curves that we've generated. So go to curve and find starts and ends. So I'm going to do this for our new vertical lines that we created, right? So you can see those now. We want these endpoints, but I want the start and end points here, and I'm going to do that by, just plugging in these curves again to this widget, right? And let's see what happens now. I'm going to use an interpolated curve. Let's see, go to spline, there we go. And just start connecting the dots. Start, I'm going to hold down shift, plug in this end, and then hold down shift still and plug in this end. Ah, all right. So that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and turn the preview off for here, turn the preview off for these points, and these points, and these points, and even these division points. All right. Great. So everything's still being computed. I'm just turning the preview off so I don't have to see everything. Okay, so from here we just need to divide these two sets of curves that we have, right? These curves and these curves. Dividing them will populate them with a number of points, and then we can start connecting those points up with lines, 1 to 1 to create sort of webbing, and then we can shift those lists back and forth in order to create diagonal bracing as well. So let's try that. And so I said that, let's do it. Curve, we need to divide them. So we go to the division set and find divide curve. I'm going to do this twice. I'm going to divide this data tree of curves as well as this data tree of curves. All right. Now you'll notice that for each curve we have a branch, right? And then each of those branches has 11 points in them because we're dividing each of those curves by 10 times. They'll have 11 points each, okay? And so it's keeping track of, like, let's say the first 11 points from the first curve, and then 11 points from the second curve, and the 11 points from the third curve for us. It's doing the same thing here, fortunately. Look at that. Okay, great. And so let's just try this. Let's connect these up 1 to 1 and draw lines. Ah, beautiful. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn this surface off. Just turn the preview off so we can just see our truss. Yeah, there we go. And so now we have these points and these points. Now we need to shift them. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go to Set and Shift. I'm going to remember to turn that wrap value to false. Make a copy of that one and plug this list of points in. Okay, shift these as well. Now it's time to make 2 more sets of lines. So we'll use the shifted set here with the regular set here, and then this shifted set here with these regular ones here. Ah, and now we have some pure truss goodness. And of course we could always dump all of these lines into a pipe widget if we wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and turn some of these points off. These as well as these. Go ahead and turn some of these things off. We'll just get a nice, all we want to see is really our trusses. Oops, I turned one wrong thing off here. That was silly. I want to turn that one off. There we go. Now it's on. Okay, and so now we can go back and we can adjust this in any number of ways. First of all, we can adjust the roof geometry, right? Excuse me. We can adjust the span of these trusses. Whoa, whoa. There we go. By the spacing of our original grid, right? And we can adjust how many and how spaced our trusses are. Okay, and then we can also adjust the shape of that upper chord. We can adjust their depths, right? And last but not least, we can plug in the number of segments, the number of divisions for each of these, and we can even adjust how much webbing and bracing we want. Okay, so that's it didn't take long, and there's not too much to it, right? But that's a, decently sophisticated graph. We can plug in all kinds of things into this, and start to generate a set of unique, differentiated trusses. So that's it in a nutshell. I recommend that you do this again, following along each time. What I'll do in the comments section is try to make a little table of contents with the time codes. So if you need to skip to a specific place, you can just look at that comment, and the time code should show up as a little hyperlink, and that'll let you skip to somewhere specific in the video. I'll try my best to try to do that as much as I can in these videos for you guys. So anyway, that's that, and stay tuned for the next video.